James Cagney was the man who transformed from a shy library worker into one of the toughest on-screen gangsters, and then without warning, tapped his way into America's heart as a singing, dancing legend. But while moviegoers thought they knew him, many of his most dramatic battles weren't on the silver screen at all. They raged behind the scenes, from a cutthroat feud with powerful studio executives to a heartbreaking family rift that only came to light after his funeral. This is the story of James Cagney, the actor who refused to be tamed. Long before James Cagney earned Hollywood fame, he faced a harsher reality on the cramped Lower East Side of Manhattan. Born in 1899 to a family struggling to put food on the table, he never truly had a carefree childhood. In fact, they were so poor that sanitation was nearly non-existent, and both the environment and harsh living conditions claimed the lives of two of his siblings. When Cagney himself fell sick, his mother wondered if he would survive the baptism, let alone make it to adulthood. Money was always scarce, and he quickly learned there was no such thing as an easy meal. His father, an amateur boxer and bartender, tried to earn what he could, but he was one man in a family of 9. Cagney saw firsthand that if you didn't fight for what you needed, life would gladly pass you by. If only he'd known how often he'd have to wield that fighting spirit later in life, this time in the glittering world of Hollywood. Cagney almost escaped the family's grinding poverty through education. After graduating high school, he enrolled at Columbia College, hoping to study art and maybe even learn German. But destiny had other plans. In 1918, a deadly flu pandemic swept across the globe, often called the Spanish flu, and tore Cagney's world apart. His father was among the tragic casualties of this outbreak. Overnight, young James Cagney found himself the family breadwinner. No longer a carefree student, he was thrust into a series of odd jobs: bellhop, junior architect, doorkeeper, anything that put food on the family table. Then he caught a break he never saw coming. While working at the New York Public Library, he met a theater professional named Florence James, who took one look at him and declared that he belonged in show business. She wasn't entirely wrong. Cagney was a skilled tap dancer, surprisingly good at street fighting, and had a robust stage presence just waiting to be discovered. The problem was he had no clue how to break into the film world. That's when sheer curiosity led him straight to the source. A family member lived near Vitagraph Studios in Brooklyn, and from across the street, Cagney watched filming sessions that lit a spark inside him. Soon he was scaling walls to sneak a peek at what went on behind those big studio fences. That spark turned into a roaring flame, even if his rise to stardom happened in the most accidental way imaginable. Cagney's first step wasn't a glamorous audition. Instead, he began backstage as a scenery boy for a pantomime show where his brother was performing. He kept his head down, avoided the spotlight, and feared the stage might swallow him whole until his brother fell sick at the worst possible moment. The director asked if Cagney knew the routine. He did, thanks to a photographic memory that let him recall almost every line and movement. When the curtains went up, so did James Cagney. He surprised himself by thriving under the footlights, setting the stage, quite literally, for his future in entertainment. Before long, he tried his hand at vaudeville, often performing comedic dance numbers, sometimes in drag, wearing wigs and dresses. Strangely enough, none of it embarrassed him. He viewed it purely as showmanship. Soon, stage roles led to bigger opportunities, including one that netted him a hefty $35 a week, a fortune compared to the meager wages he'd been earning at a department store. Cagney inched closer to real financial stability, enough to send money home to his mother and keep only a fraction for himself. But Broadway's bright lights eventually gave way to Hollywood illusions. When he and his wife, Frances Willard Vernon, Headed west to chase the big movie break, they found only closed doors. The studios just weren't interested. Disheartened, they returned to New York, but not for long. In an unexpected reversal of fortune, Cagney snagged a part in the play Outside Looking In. His hair color may have sealed the deal. The production was searching for someone with fiery red locks, and James fit that profile perfectly. The show did well, but the real prize was the critical praise directed at Cagney. This positive press landed him in the path of a producer who offered him a role in the stage show Broadway. He and his wife nearly boarded a ship for London to perform there until at the last minute the producers changed their minds. Cagney was out of a job and technically homeless, having given up their apartment in anticipation of the journey. Though this blow almost forced him to quit show business, he started a dance school instead. Then yet another chance came, knocking with the show Women Go On Forever. And from there, a lesser known production called Penny Arcade. Critics hated the show, but they absolutely loved Cagney and his co star, Joan Blondell. That's when fate and one important mogul took a critical interest. Al Jolson purchased the rights to Penny Arcade for a film adaptation under the condition that Warner Brothers keep Cagney and Blondell in their roles. Jack Warner wasn't thrilled, but he reluctantly agreed. Suddenly, James Cagney had a Hollywood contract and a foot in the door that would lead him to superstardom. Now under contract at Warner Brothers, Cagney got a part in his first feature film, which they renamed Sinner's Holiday. The studio heads thought he had minimal star power, but they were about to be proved dead wrong. Soon after, he found himself in the gangster flick The Public Enemy with top billing, after the director decided Cagney was better suited to the lead role than the originally cast Edward Woods. That's how James Cagney ended up creating one of the most infamous scenes in classic cinema, smashing a grapefruit into May Clark's face at the breakfast table. Audiences were both shocked and mesmerized. This gritty, impulsive brutality was new to filmgoers, and suddenly the name James Cagney was on everyone's lips. That success guaranteed him more gangster roles, and with them, the surprising realization that his gangster persona would become his Hollywood calling card. If a film needed a tough guy from the wrong side of the tracks, they turned to Cagney. Yet behind the scenes, he was deeply unhappy with Warner Brothers. The studio routinely lowballed him on pay and demanded promotional appearances for movies he wasn't even in. In that era, powerful studios essentially owned actors, controlling their salaries, roles, and schedules. Cagney hated it. For a while, he walked away, returning to New York in protest. His brother Bill stepped in as his agent, doggedly negotiating to secure James a $1,000 a week contract, much better than what he'd been earning, but still far below his true worth. Despite the raise, the friction didn't fade. Cagney kept pushing the studio for fairer treatment. He also grew weary of filming scenes with real ammunition, which Warner Brothers allegedly used to save money on expensive blanks. During the making of Taxi, Cagney narrowly avoided an on-set mishap involving live rounds. Between that and the punishing schedule, he was convinced something had to give. That's when Cagney helped form a group that changed Hollywood forever, the Screen Actors Guild, SAG. Alongside names like Humphrey Bogart, he fought tooth and nail to protect actors from exploitative contracts and endless work hours. Soon enough, he was embroiled in lawsuits against Warner Brothers, with the studio retaliating by making him produce more films per year than his contract allowed. Tensions reached a boiling point, but unbelievably, Cagney came out on top. In a stunning legal victory, Warner Brothers was forced to offer him $150,000 per film, a limit of 2 films a year, and the freedom to choose his roles. The rebel had defeated the powerhouse, and every other actor in Hollywood had reason to celebrate. Just as James Cagney was becoming the poster boy for tough guy gangsters, Hollywood faced a new moral crackdown known as the Hays Code. Violent content and explicit acts were now heavily monitored, and that meant Cagney had to pivot. Warner Brothers cast him in comedic roles, and audiences were delighted by his comedic timing. But that was just a warm up act for his next big move. Producer Hal B. Wallace dreamt of making a film about legendary Broadway showman George M. Cohan. Titled Yankee Doodle Dandy, it was a sharp departure from the gritty worlds Cagney typically inhabited. Instead of brandishing a Tommy gun, Cagney would tap dance across stages, sing patriotic tunes, and bring to life an all American hero of musicals. And it couldn't have come at a more significant time. Production began right after the attack on Pearl Harbor, when Americans desperately needed a morale boost. Cagney poured his soul into the role. He had lived tap dance breaks in the middle of dramatic scenes, fractured a rib without stopping production, and soared with an energy that felt unstoppable. The risk paid off. He won the Best Actor Oscar for his performance, the first time anyone had claimed that trophy for a musical role. It was a triumph that would define the latter half of his career and prove he was far more than just Hollywood's favorite tough guy. Riding high from his Academy Award, Cagney decided to go rogue. Teaming up again with his brother, he founded Cagney Productions so he could call the shots on his own projects. He also took on presidency of the Screen Actors Guild, solidifying his position as one of Hollywood's most outspoken advocates for fair treatment. At the same time, he showed no sign of slowing down on the big screen, entertaining troops during World War II and championing projects that combined drama with the musical flair he'd come to love. But not every plan reached a happy ending. After a few moderate successes, Cagney realized his production company just couldn't match the distribution power of Warner Brothers. Reluctantly, he sold Cagney Productions to his former rivals, returning to the fold with a favorable contract. On the set of 1955's Mr. Roberts, however, he clashed with legendary director John Ford. Ford had once warned Cagney that they were bound to tangle, and that day arrived in a heated confrontation that nearly turned physical. Cagney, then well into his 50s, still retained the fiery spirit that had once fueled his success. Ford backed down, but the tension left a mark on Cagney, who soon decided to step back from the Hollywood grind. While his professional life had always been intense, few fans realized the strain in Cagney's personal life. He and his wife Frances couldn't have biological children, so they adopted a son and a daughter. As they grew older, these relationships unraveled. By the time Cagney was nearing his final years, he was no longer on speaking terms with either child. Heartbreak struck when his adopted son died before him, leaving Cagney feeling both furious and despondent. After the star passed away in 1986 from a heart attack, the general public discovered a final bombshell. Cagney had cut his children out of his will entirely, leaving his entire estate to his wife. No explanation was ever made public, but speculation ran rampant. Were there deep family rifts that never healed, old grudges? It was a shock to many that America's song and dance man had such dark family secrets. James Cagney's life was a masterclass in contradiction. He was the tough-talking gangster who couldn't stop dancing. He fought the mightiest Hollywood studio bosses in court and won. He soared from a tenement on Manhattan's Lower East Side to the top of the A-list, all while forging new paths for fellow performers. Yet behind that rags to riches story lay heartbreak, adversity, and a willingness to go head to head with anyone who tried to control him. Even decades after his passing, we still uncover stories of family feuds, final betrayals, and quiet heartbreak. Perhaps it's fitting that the man who played America's biggest gangster heroes also had the courage to stand up for himself when no one else would. And maybe that's the real story of James Cagney, a legend who loved to dance but fought even harder. As you look back on his life and legacy, you can see the spark that never left him, whether he was flipping grapefruits on camera or tapping his way to an Oscar. It's a reminder that what we see on screen only scratches the surface. Behind every Hollywood star is a very real person, grappling with battles that might shock the rest of us. And in James Cagney's case, that fight was just as riveting as any gangster film he ever made.